Every morning begins the same way. You pour a cup of coffee, glance through the kitchen window, and somewhere in the garden, a small bird lands in a place that feels strangely familiar. Perhaps it's the bright red flash of a northern cardinal. Maybe it's a curious black-capped chickadee hopping between branches before stopping at your feeder. You've seen that little visitor so many times that it almost blends into the background of your daily life. Like most people, you've probably assumed it's simply another bird of the same species. After all, birds come and go, don't they? But what if that assumption isn't true? What if the bird visiting your yard this morning isn't just another cardinal or another chickadee? What if it's the very same individual that greeted your garden last winter and the winter before that? What if it has quietly watched the changing seasons alongside you for years without you ever realizing it? Modern ornithology suggests that this possibility is far more common than most backyard bird lovers imagine. And once you understand why certain birds return to the same yard year after year, you'll never look at your feeder or its feathered visitors the same way again. Because your backyard may not simply be a place birds visit. For one remarkable little bird, it may have become home. One of the biggest surprises in backyard bird science is that many birds don't spend their lives wandering from place to place. Once they discover a safe territory with reliable food, clean water, shelter, and predictable conditions, leaving becomes the exception rather than the rule. To us, a backyard may look ordinary. To a bird, it is a carefully mapped landscape. Every tree offers a different level of protection. Every shrub provides a possible hiding place from hawks. Every feeder represents a dependable source of energy, especially during the harsh months of winter. Researchers have found that many common backyard birds show remarkable loyalty to successful territories. After surviving one season, they often return to the same area because they already understand its hidden dangers and its valuable resources. Starting over somewhere new would mean learning everything again, and in the wild, that can be a dangerous gamble. Over time, your yard becomes more than just another stop along the way. It becomes a place where daily routines are established. The safest branches, the quickest escape routes, and the best feeding times become part of a bird's memory, repeated day after day and season after season. And if the environment remains peaceful, there is one more detail these birds quietly begin to remember. The person who shares that space with them. A bird doesn't need to understand who you are to recognize something even more important, your routine. Every day, your backyard follows a pattern. The back door opens at nearly the same time each morning. The feeder is refilled on certain days. The garden grows quiet in the evening, then comes alive again with the first light of dawn. While these moments seem ordinary to you, they become valuable information to the birds that live nearby. Birds are exceptional observers. Their survival depends on noticing the smallest changes around them. They remember where food appeared yesterday, which branch offered the safest view, and which sounds signaled danger. Over weeks, months, and even years, those observations become a dependable mental map of the world they call home. That is why some birds seem to know exactly when to visit your feeder. They aren't guessing. They're following a routine that has proven safe time and time again. If you usually refill the feeder on Saturday mornings, a long-time visitor may begin checking the area around that same time. If your yard is peaceful after sunrise, it learns that those hours are worth returning for. Little by little, your daily habits become part of the bird's own schedule. Without a single word exchanged, two completely different lives begin following rhythms that quietly fit together. And after enough seasons pass, that familiar visitor is no longer returning only because of the seeds you provide. It is returning because your backyard has become one of the most predictable places in its world. Most of us think every bird of the same species looks exactly alike. A cardinal is a cardinal. A chickadee is just another chickadee. But the longer you watch, the more those assumptions begin to fade. Look closely, and you'll notice tiny differences that field guides rarely mention. One bird always lands on the highest branch before flying to the feeder. Another prefers to wait in a nearby shrub until the area is completely quiet. One seems bold enough to feed while you're standing at the window, while another disappears the moment the curtain moves. These aren't random behaviors. Like people, individual birds develop their own habits and personalities through experience. Some are naturally cautious. Others are surprisingly confident. Each successful trip to a feeder reinforces those behaviors, making them more consistent over time. Even small physical details can become familiar. A slightly worn tail feather after molting, a tiny nick along the edge of a beak, a lighter patch of feathers on the chest. None of these features may seem important on their own, but together they create a bird that is unlike any other. Many experienced bird watchers eventually reach a remarkable point where they recognize a familiar visitor before noticing its markings. The flight path, the way it pauses before landing, or the angle it holds its head is often enough. And once you begin seeing birds as unique individuals, instead of identical members of a species, something quietly changes. You stop waiting for birds to arrive and start recognizing old neighbors returning home. When people talk about feeding backyard birds, they often focus on the food itself: sunflower seeds, suet, fresh water. While these things certainly matter, they are only part of the story. For a bird that has visited your yard through countless mornings, consistency may be just as valuable as the food you provide. Imagine surviving every day in a world where every shadow could hide a predator, and every unfamiliar sound might signal danger. In that kind of life, finding one place that remains peaceful season after season is incredibly valuable. Your backyard becomes more than a feeding stop. It becomes a place where uncertainty is replaced by familiarity. That doesn't mean a bird thinks about people the way we think about one another, but it does learn from experience. Day after day, it discovers that the person who steps onto the porch every morning doesn't chase it away. The gate opens with a familiar sound. The feeder is refilled. The garden stays calm. Another safe day passes. Over hundreds of visits, those repeated experiences create something remarkable: trust built through predictability. Without realizing it, you become part of the environment the bird depends on, not because it knows your name, but because your presence has become one more reliable pattern in its world. Perhaps that's why some mornings feel strangely familiar. Before you've even taken your first sip of coffee, a small pair of wings appears on the same branch, waiting patiently for another ordinary day to begin. And by then, the story is no longer just about a bird returning to your backyard. It's about two lives that have quietly shared the same place, one peaceful morning after another, for far longer than either of you ever noticed. Tomorrow morning, your backyard will probably look just as it always does. The sun will rise over the trees. The feeder will sway gently in the breeze, and before long, a familiar bird may appear on its favorite branch. But after today, you may never see that moment the same way again. Instead of thinking, "There's another cardinal," or "There's another chickadee," you may begin to wonder whether it's the very same bird that has quietly shared your backyard through countless mornings, changing seasons, and passing years. That simple idea changes everything. A bird feeder is more than a place where wild birds find food. For a long-time visitor, it becomes part of a familiar landscape filled with safe perches, reliable meals, and predictable routines. Every successful visit reinforces the decision to return again. Without realizing it, you've become part of that routine as well. Your footsteps, the sound of the back door, and the peaceful rhythm of your garden have all become familiar pieces of a world the bird knows well. Perhaps the greatest surprise isn't that birds remember places. It's that we've been sharing our lives with the same tiny neighbors without ever noticing. So tomorrow, before you walk away from the window, take one extra moment to watch. Notice where the bird lands, how it moves, and the confidence with which it explores your yard. You may not be watching another visitor. You may be welcoming back an old friend. If this story changed the way you see the birds in your backyard, tell us in the comments. How long have you had a feeder? Have you ever noticed one bird returning year after year? And if you enjoy discovering the hidden lives of backyard birds through science and storytelling, subscribe to Backyard Bird World, because sometimes the most extraordinary stories in nature begin in the place we know best, our own backyard.